I was born in a small house made of thin wood in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, where the nearest neighbor was 2 miles away and the well outside was our only source of water. My name is Margaret Holloway, and I'm 74 now, but when I close my eyes, I still see that porch swing swaying slow in the evening, the chains groaning like they were tired. Mama would sit there after supper, rocking me in her arms, humming hymns she learned from her mama. She never sang loud, just soft, like she was afraid someone might hear. I didn't know why then. I just knew that when Daddy came home from the fields, the singing stopped. He'd come in smelling like sweat and dirt and whiskey, his boots heavy on the floorboards. He didn't say much, just took off his hat, hung it on the nail by the door, and sat down. Sometimes he'd nod at me. Other times, he'd glare at Mama for not having supper ready on time. I remember once she burned the cornbread, and he slapped her across the face so hard her head hit the wall. She didn't cry. She just wiped her face with her apron and started over. He never hit me like that. Not at first. He'd pick me up, set me on his lap and say, "You're my little angel." And his hand would slide down my arm, then rest too low on my thigh. I didn't know what it meant. I just knew if I moved, he'd stop smiling. If I cried, he'd say, "Don't be a baby." So I stayed still. I learned to smile back. I learned to let him hold me. I thought that's what love was, being quiet when you were scared, staying still when you felt sick inside. Mama never talked about it. Not to me, not to anyone. She'd wash my clothes extra careful after he held me, like she could scrub the feeling off. I'd sit on the edge of the tub while she scrubbed, my legs still tingling, my stomach tight. I never told her. I didn't know how. I didn't know it was supposed to be wrong. I just knew that after he touched me, the house got colder. The fire in the stove would go out, even if there was wood left. The wind outside would stop. Everything felt heavy. I'd go to bed early, lying on my side, staring at the crack in the ceiling above my bed, counting the seconds until morning. I'd pretend I was asleep when he came in, even if I wasn't. He'd stand by my bed sometimes, just watching. I'd hold my breath until he left. I didn't know if he was checking to see if I was really asleep, or if he was just making sure I was still there. I didn't know if he was sorry, or if he liked doing it. I didn't know anything except that I had to be good, be quiet, be small, be invisible. I started sleeping with my arms crossed over my chest, like I was holding myself together. I didn't know it was strange. I thought every girl did it. I thought this was just how life was. I thought if I stayed still, if I didn't make a sound, I could make it through. I was 8 when I realized he did it to Mama too. Not the same way, not with his hands on her body, but in other ways. I saw him take her money from her purse when she wasn't looking. I saw him sell the eggs she saved to buy shoes for me, and then tell her she was wasting money on useless things. I saw him break her favorite cup because she didn't heat the coffee fast enough. One night, I heard them arguing through the wall. He said, "You think I don't know what you're thinking? You think I don't see you looking at me like I'm a dog?" She didn't answer, just cried, quiet, like she was trying not to wake me. I pressed my ear to the wall. I wanted to run to her, but I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I knew if I did, he'd come in and yell. He'd say, "You're a bad girl for listening." So I stayed still. I held my pillow tight against my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't breathe. I just waited until the silence came back. That's when I knew. Mama wasn't just scared of him. She was broken by him. And I was learning how to be broken too. I started avoiding him. I'd stay outside longer, helping with the chickens, cleaning the barn, anything to be away from the house. I didn't want to be near him, but I still smiled when he came in. I still said, "Yes, sir," when he asked me to fetch something. I still sat on his lap when he called me over, because I didn't know how else to survive. I was 12 when I stopped asking for hugs. I stopped running to him when he came home. I stopped saying, "I love you," when he told me he was proud of me. I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to say stop. But I learned how to disappear. I'd slip out the back door before breakfast. I'd stay in the woods with the goats until dark. I'd sleep on the floor of the shed when the weather got cold, just so I wouldn't have to be inside with him. I kept my clothes on even when it was hot. I wore long sleeves to bed. I washed myself extra long in the wash tub, scrubbing my skin until it turned red. I didn't know what I was trying to clean. I just knew I didn't want to feel like I did after he touched me. I started writing in a notebook I hid under the floorboard. I wrote down the days he touched me. I wrote down the things he said. I wrote down the names of the hymns Mama sang. I didn't know why. I just knew if I wrote it down, maybe it was real. And if it was real, maybe one day I could tell someone. I didn't think I ever would, but I wrote it anyway. I wrote about how he called me his little angel, while his fingers slid under my shirt. I wrote about how Mama's hands shook when she handed him his plate. I wrote about how I prayed every night that I'd wake up different, that I'd wake up brave, that I'd wake up not afraid. I never told anyone. Not the school teacher who asked why I had bruises on my arms. I said I fell off the fence. Not the neighbor lady who brought us soup and asked if I needed help. I said we were fine. Not the preacher who came by on Sundays and asked if we were saved. I just nodded and smiled. I learned early that asking for help made things worse. When Mama tried to talk to the doctor about her headaches, he told her she was just tired. When she asked for money to fix the roof, Daddy took her paycheck and said she didn't need it. I watched her give up. I watched her stop talking. I watched her stop looking at herself in the mirror. I didn't want to become her, but I didn't know how to be anything else. I carried the notebook under my mattress. I carried the fear in my chest. I carried the silence in my throat. I didn't know I was supposed to scream. I didn't know I was allowed to run. I just knew I had to survive. And so I did. Every day. Every night. Every time he said, "You're my little angel," I said nothing. I just sat still. I just waited. I just prayed it would end. I was 16 when I saw him look at my friend Lillian the same way he looked at me. She came over to borrow a cup of sugar, and he stood too close when he handed it to her. He smiled too long. His hand brushed hers. She didn't pull away. She laughed. I felt sick. I went to my room and locked the door. I opened the notebook. I wrote, "He did it again." I didn't write who. I didn't have to. I knew. I knew what was coming. I knew I couldn't stay. I couldn't let him touch her like he touched me. I couldn't let her become what Mama became. That night, I packed a small bag. I put in 2 dresses, my boots, the notebook, and the picture of Mama and me from when I was 5. I didn't take anything else. I didn't take my toys. I didn't take my hairbrush. I didn't take my Bible. I just took what I needed to leave. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't cry. I just walked out the back door, past the chicken coop, past the old oak tree, and down the dirt road toward the highway. I didn't look back. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. I didn't know if I'd ever be safe, but I knew I had to try. I didn't know if I'd ever speak again, but I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I was 12 when Mama didn't come down for breakfast. I waited at the table like always, eating my grits with a spoon, listening for her footsteps on the stairs. The coffee pot was cold. Her apron was still hanging on the hook by the back door, the one she always left there after cleaning up. I touched it. It smelled like lye soap and sweat. Daddy came in from the barn, stomping his boots on the mat. He didn't look at me. He just said, "She's gone to visit her sister in Kentucky. Won't be back for a while." I didn't ask where. I didn't ask why. I knew better. I just nodded and kept eating. I went to her room later, after he went back out. Her bed was made, like she'd left in a hurry, but her shoes were still under the bed. Her comb was on the dresser. Her Bible was open on the nightstand, right where she always left it, on the psalm about peace. I opened her dresser drawer. Her good dress was gone. Her Sunday shoes were gone. But her locket, the little silver one with the tiny photo of her and me when I was 5, wasn't there. I looked under the bed, behind the dresser, in the closet. Then I went outside, past the chicken coop, past the woodpile, to the azalea bush behind the shed. I dug with my hands until my nails broke. I found it buried under dirt and leaves. The chain was broken, clean, like someone had snapped it on purpose. I held it in my palm. It was cold. I didn't cry. I just put it in my pocket and walked back inside. That night, I slept on the floor in the kitchen. I didn't want to be in my room. I didn't want to be alone with him. I heard him come in, the door creaking, his boots thudding on the porch. He didn't say anything, just went to his room. I stayed awake, listening. At midnight, I heard the floorboards creak again. He came into the kitchen. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. He stood there for a long time, just looking. Then he walked to the sink, poured himself a glass of water, drank it slow, and left. The next morning, I was in the kitchen before he woke up. I started scrubbing the floor with a brush and soap. I scrubbed the same spot over and over until my knees burned. I washed the dishes, I swept the porch, I lit the stove and made his coffee. I did everything I could think of to stay busy. He came down, sat at the table, and didn't say a word. He just ate. When he finished, he wiped his mouth with his napkin and said, "You're doing good, girl." I didn't answer. I just kept scrubbing. I knew then that Mama was gone for good, and I was the one who had to take her place. The rules changed after that. I had to be up before sunrise. I had to cook his meals, wash his clothes, mend his shirts, clean the house from top to bottom. I couldn't leave the yard without asking. I couldn't talk to the neighbors. I couldn't bring friends over. If I made a mistake, burned the bread, spilled the milk, forgot to clean the stove, he'd just stare. Not yell, not hit me, just stare. And that stare was worse than any slap. I learned to move fast, to be quiet, to not look him in the eye. I started sleeping with my clothes on. I stopped combing my hair. I stopped talking unless he asked me something. I didn't go to school anymore. He said I didn't need it, said school was for boys. I didn't argue. I just did what he told me. I cleaned the house. I cooked. I washed. I ironed. I never asked why. I never asked if Mama was coming back. I just kept my head down and did the work. I thought if I did everything right, he wouldn't hurt me. I thought if I was useful, I'd be safe. It started the same night Mama disappeared. I was in bed, lying on my side, trying not to move. I heard the door open. I didn't turn around. I didn't breathe. He came in slow. He stood by the bed for a long time. Then he sat down on the edge. I felt his weight. I felt his hand on my leg. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't say anything. He whispered, "This is our secret, girl. If you tell anyone, they'll take you away. They'll say you made it up. They'll put Mama in jail for running off. You don't want that, do you?" I shook my head. I didn't know if he was lying. I didn't know if Mama was really in jail. I just knew I was scared. He didn't say much else. He just touched me. Then he got up and left. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling. I didn't wash myself that night. I didn't change my clothes. I just lay there, cold and still. I didn't sleep. I just waited for morning. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even tell myself it was wrong. I thought it was just something that happened to girls who stayed alone with men. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would stop. But it didn't stop. It kept happening. I learned to live with it. I learned to hold my breath when he came near. I learned to smile when he said I was a good girl. I learned to scrub my skin raw in the tub after he touched me. I used the same bar of soap for weeks until it was a tiny sliver. I didn't want to use fresh soap. I didn't want to smell like anything but what he left on me. I started writing in a notebook I hid under my mattress. I wrote down the days. I wrote down what he said. I wrote down how he looked at me. I didn't know why. I just knew if I wrote it, maybe it was real. Maybe I wasn't imagining it. Maybe someone would find it one day and know I didn't make it up. I didn't tell anyone. Not the school teacher who came by once to ask why I wasn't in class. I told her I was sick. Not the preacher who came to the door on Sundays. I told him Mama was visiting family. Not even the neighbor lady who brought us soup and asked if I needed help. I just smiled and said we were fine. I carried that secret like a rock in my chest. I carried it every day. I carried it to bed. I carried it to the kitchen. I carried it to the barn. I carried it until I didn't know who I was anymore. I was just the girl who cleaned, the girl who cooked, the girl who didn't talk, the girl who let him touch her. I turned 13 that year. I didn't have a party. I didn't get a cake. I didn't get a gift. I woke up and went straight to work. I scrubbed the floors. I washed the clothes. I made his breakfast. He ate in silence. Then he said, "You're growing up fast, girl." I didn't answer. I just kept wiping the table. That night, he came into my room again. He didn't say anything. He just sat down on the bed. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just closed my eyes and waited. He touched me like he always did, whispered the same words. "It's our secret." I nodded. I didn't speak. I didn't beg. I didn't fight. I just let it happen. And when he left, I got up and washed myself again. I scrubbed my skin until it turned red. I didn't stop until the water ran cold. I didn't stop until my hands shook. I didn't stop until I felt nothing. I lay back down. I stared at the ceiling. I counted the cracks. I counted the minutes until dawn. I didn't pray for Mama to come back. I didn't pray for help. I just prayed for the morning to come, because when the sun rose, I knew I could still go on. I could still scrub the floors. I could still make the coffee. I could still be quiet. I could still survive. And that was all I knew how to do. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video, because when you stop doing this, YouTube understands that you don't like this content and stops recommending good stories like this. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. I was 16 when I first saw Eli Thompson at the revival tent near Mill Creek. It was a hot Sunday night, and I had gone with the preacher's wife because Mama said I should. I didn't want to be there. I just wanted to get it over with. But Eli was standing by the back of the tent, holding a basket of apples. He wasn't singing. He wasn't praying. He was just watching people, like he was waiting for something. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. He smiled. Not the kind of smile that says, "I'm nice." The kind that says, "I see you." He came over and handed me an apple. "You look like you need this," he said. I didn't say anything. I just took it. We didn't talk then. But the next week, I went back. I told Mama I was helping with the church cleanup. I wasn't. I was meeting him behind the feed store. He had a job helping his dad pick fruit, and he'd sneak away during lunch. We sat on an old hay bale. He talked about the orchard, how the trees got too old, how his brother left for the city, how he wanted to fix the old pump so they could water the rows better. I told him about my chores, how I had to wake up before sunrise to feed the chickens, how I washed clothes by hand because the washer was broken. He didn't act like it was strange. He didn't act like I was some poor girl he felt sorry for. He just listened. We shared apples. We held hands. One day, he kissed me. It was quick. Just a brush of his lips on my cheek. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I was supposed to kiss him back. I didn't kiss him back. But I didn't pull away either. For the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered. Not because I cleaned well. Not because I was quiet. Just because I was there. I started thinking about leaving. Not just running away. Actually leaving. I thought about what it would be like to live somewhere with running water. To have a bed that didn't creak when I turned over. To walk down a street and not know every person who passed. I imagined working in a store. Maybe selling things. Maybe learning how to use a cash register. I saved every penny I could. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even tell Eli. I hid the money in the bottom of my shoebox under the bed. $2 from the eggs I sold. $5 from mending Mr. Hargrove's shirt. I kept it all. I didn't spend it on candy or soap. I saved it. I wrote down the date on a piece of paper. August 17th. That was my 18th birthday. I figured if I left on that day, I'd be starting fresh. I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to give Daddy another chance to ruin it. I started packing. I put 2 dresses in a burlap sack, my good shoes, my comb, the picture of Mama and me from when I was 5. I didn't take anything else, not my Bible, not my dolls, not the quilt my grandmother made. I didn't want to carry anything that reminded me of this place. I didn't want to carry anything that reminded me of him. I knew I had to go fast. I knew I had to go quiet. I knew I had to go alone. I didn't know it, but Daddy had been watching me. He didn't say anything. He just stared more. He didn't hit me. He didn't yell. He just watched, like he was waiting for me to make a mistake. Then one night, I came home late. I had been at the feed store with Eli. We had talked for over an hour. I didn't even realize how late it was until I saw the porch light on. I walked in slow. I thought I could sneak to my room, but he was sitting at the table. He had a bottle of whiskey. He didn't look at me. He just said, "You've been seeing that boy again." I didn't answer. I didn't move. He stood up. He came toward me. He grabbed my arm. He pulled me into the kitchen. He hit me, first with his open hand, then with the belt. He hit me until I fell. He kicked me when I was on the floor. I didn't cry out. I didn't beg. I just curled up. I felt the blood on my lip. I felt the pain in my ribs. He stood over me and said, "You think you can leave me for him? You think he wants you? You think he'll take you away from this?" He spit on the floor. "I'll kill him before I let you go." I didn't know if he meant it. I didn't care. I knew I had to leave. That night, I lay on the floor of my room. I didn't sleep. I just listened to the clock tick. I thought about Eli. I thought about the money in my shoebox. I thought about the bus station. I thought about what I'd do when I got there. I thought about never coming back. I waited until the storm came. It was the night before my birthday. The sky turned black before sundown. Thunder rolled like a train coming down the tracks. Rain came hard. I waited until everyone was asleep. I took the sack. I took the money. I took the picture. I slipped out the back door. The rain soaked me right away. My shoes were gone. I had left them in the closet. I walked barefoot through the mud. I didn't care. I didn't feel the rocks. I didn't feel the thorns. I just walked. I walked past the chicken coop. I walked past the old barn. I walked past the fence where I used to sit and watch the sunset. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I walked for miles. My feet bled. My legs ached. My stomach hurt from fear. I didn't think about Eli. I didn't think about Daddy. I didn't think about Mama. I just thought about the road. I thought about the bus. I thought about the words I'd say when I got to Knoxville. I need a ticket to Nashville. I didn't know where Nashville was. I just knew it wasn't here. I didn't know if I'd ever see my family again. I didn't care. I just knew I couldn't stay. I walked until my legs gave out. I sat under a bridge. I cried. Not loud, just quiet tears. I didn't know if I'd ever be safe. I didn't know if I'd ever be happy. I just knew I couldn't live like that anymore. I reached the bus station just before dawn. The rain had stopped. The sky was gray. I was covered in mud. My feet were swollen. My clothes were torn. I looked like a stray dog. I walked up to the ticket counter. The man behind the glass looked at me. He didn't ask where I was from. He didn't ask how old I was. He didn't ask if I needed help. He just said, "Where are you going?" I swallowed hard. I didn't know how to say it without sounding crazy. "Nashville," I said. He looked at me again. Then he nodded. "One way?" I nodded. He took my money. All of it. The $2, the $5, the rest. I didn't care. He gave me a ticket and a paper cup of water. I sat on a bench and waited. I didn't look around. I didn't talk to anyone. I just held the ticket. I held the picture of Mama. I held the sack. I held myself. I didn't know if I was brave. I didn't know if I was stupid. I just knew I was leaving. The bus came. The doors opened. I climbed on. I found a seat by the window. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. I just stared out the window as the station disappeared. I didn't know what was waiting for me. I didn't know if I'd survive. I just knew I wasn't going back. I didn't know if Eli ever came looking. I didn't know if Daddy told him I was gone. I didn't know if he even cared. I didn't care anymore. I didn't think about him after that. I didn't think about the beatings. I didn't think about the silence. I didn't think about the locket I left under the azalea bush. I didn't think about the house. I didn't think about the smell of the whiskey. I didn't think about the way he looked at me. I thought only about the bus. I thought only about the road. I thought only about the fact that I was moving. Forward. Away. Out. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was leaving. And for the first time since I could remember, I wasn't afraid of what was ahead. I was afraid of what was behind. And that was enough. I sat there, soaked and shaking, with nothing but a sack and a ticket, and I whispered to myself, "I'm not going back." I said it again, "I'm not going back." I said it a third time, louder, "I'm not going back." And that was the last thing I said to that life. I didn't look back. I didn't turn around. I just kept staring out the window as the world changed around me. I was gone, and I never looked back. Nashville hit me like a wall. I didn't know what to expect, but it wasn't this. The streets were loud, cars honked all the time, people walked fast like they were running from something. I didn't know how to cross the street without looking both ways 10 times. The lights at night were too bright, and the smells, grease, exhaust, coffee, made me sick at first. I slept on a thin cot in the back of the diner, behind the kitchen, next to the trash bins. The mattress was just a foam pad on the floor, and the only thing I had was my sack with 2 dresses, my shoes, and the picture of Mama. I worked from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m., 6 days a week. I served eggs, coffee, toast, pie. I wiped tables, refilled sugar, cleaned up spills. I didn't talk much. I just did what I was told. The other waitresses didn't care about me. The cook yelled at me if I got the orders wrong. The customers didn't look at me unless they needed more ketchup. I felt like I was invisible, but not in a good way. In a way that said I didn't matter. I didn't cry. I didn't complain. I just kept working. I saved every dollar I could. I bought a pair of socks every 2 weeks. I ate the leftover rolls after closing. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have a bus pass. I didn't know how to get anywhere. I just knew I had to stay alive. I met Lila on my 3rd week. She worked the breakfast shift. She was tall, dark-skinned, with hair that looked like a crown of tight curls. She wore bright blouses and smelled like cinnamon and soap. She didn't talk to anyone much, but she always smiled at me when she passed by. One night, after we closed, I was washing dishes, my hands raw from the hot water and grease. I was tired. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Lila came in with a cup of coffee and sat on the stool next to me. She didn't ask me anything. She just said, "You look like you've been carrying something heavy for a long time." I didn't answer. I just kept scrubbing. She sat there for 10 minutes drinking her coffee. Then she said, "Honey, you carry ghosts. But you don't have to carry them alone." I stopped washing. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if she meant something bad or if she was just being kind. She didn't push. She just nodded like she understood. The next night, she asked me to sit with her after work. We sat on the back steps, away from the noise. She asked me where I was from. I told her Tennessee. She asked if I had family. I said no. She didn't ask why. She just said, "Okay." Then she asked me what I wanted to do. I didn't know. I said I just wanted to be safe. She looked at me and said, "Safe isn't a place. Safe is knowing you can stand up and walk away." That night, she started teaching me. Lila taught me things I never learned from school or from my mother. She took me to the public library. She showed me how to use the computer to look up bus routes. She helped me open a bank account. I was scared. I thought they'd ask for my social security number and find out I was lying about my age. She said, "They don't care who you were. They care that you're here now." I put in my first $20. It felt like a miracle. She taught me how to read a paycheck. She showed me how to write a check. She taught me how to use a phone booth to call a friend. I didn't have any friends, but I learned how to dial. She told me to stand up straight when I walked. "Even if your bones feel hollow," she said, "walk like you own the ground." I practiced in front of the mirror in the bathroom. I didn't like the way I looked at first. I slouched. I looked down. I moved like I was afraid of being hit. But Lila made me practice. "Look people in the eye," she said. "Even if you're scared, even if you don't know what to say, just look." I started doing it. I looked at the customers when I handed them their coffee. I looked at the cook when he yelled. I looked at the bus driver when I boarded. It didn't make me brave, but it made me less small. I told Lila about Daddy when I was ready. I didn't plan to. I just started talking one night. I told her about the silence, about the way he looked at me, about how I thought it was normal, about how I didn't tell Mama because I was scared she'd be punished too. I didn't cry. I just talked, low and fast, like I was afraid someone would hear. Lila didn't interrupt. She didn't say, "Oh no," or "That's terrible." She just sat there, listening. When I finished, she took my hand. Her hand was warm, strong. "You survived," she said. "Now live." That was it. No advice, no sermon. Just those words. They stayed with me. I started sleeping with my head up. I started eating more. I started asking questions. I asked Lila why she didn't have children. She said, "I had one. He died when he was 3. I didn't think I could love again. I didn't ask why he died. I didn't need to. I just held her hand. We didn't talk about it again. But after that, I didn't feel so alone. I didn't feel like a ghost anymore. I felt like a person. I started saving money for a real bed. I started asking for more shifts. I started writing down my thoughts in a notebook I bought with my own money. I didn't write about Daddy. I wrote about the bus schedule, about the price of eggs, about the name of the street where the laundromat was. I wrote about the day I bought my first pair of real shoes, not the ones I'd worn for 2 years. I wrote about the day I walked into the bank alone and opened my own account. Lila didn't ask if I was okay. She just smiled when she saw me walking taller. I didn't tell anyone else about Daddy. Not the other waitresses, not the manager, not the guy who delivered the milk. I didn't need to. Lila knew, and that was enough. I started going to the library every Saturday. I read books about cities, about how people lived, about how they got jobs, paid bills, bought houses. I didn't know if I'd ever do those things. But I started to believe I could. I started to believe I deserved to. I didn't think about going back to Tennessee. I didn't think about what Daddy was doing. I didn't think about Mama. I thought about the bus routes. I thought about the next paycheck. I thought about the new pair of socks I could buy. I thought about the day I'd have a real bed with sheets I washed myself. Lila didn't give me money. She didn't give me a place to stay. She didn't fix my life. She just showed me that I could fix it myself. She didn't tell me I was strong. She didn't say I was brave. She just acted like I was already those things. And after a while, I started to believe it. I started to walk like I owned the ground. I started to look people in the eye. I started to speak up when I needed more hours. I started to say no when I didn't want to work late. I didn't know how to be a person before Lila. I only knew how to be quiet. She didn't change me. She just reminded me that I was already here, that I was already alive, that I didn't have to carry the ghosts alone. I didn't know then that Lila was the first person who ever saw me as a person and not as a problem. She didn't try to fix me. She didn't try to save me. She just said, "You survived. Now live." And that was enough. I didn't become rich. I didn't become famous. I didn't become someone else. I became me, the me who could open a bank account, the me who could read a bus schedule, the me who could stand up straight even when my knees shook. I didn't forget what happened. I didn't pretend it didn't happen, but I stopped letting it control me. I started working more hours. I started saving more money. I started thinking about the future, not in a dreamy way, but in a real way. I thought about getting my own apartment. I thought about buying a second-hand car. I thought about going to night school. I didn't know if I'd ever do it, but I started believing I could. Lila didn't leave Nashville. She stayed at the diner, but every time I walked past her, she'd smile. She'd say, "How's the bank account?" And I'd say, "Growing." And she'd nod like she already knew. One day, she didn't say anything. She just handed me a paper bag. Inside was a new pair of shoes. "For your birthday," she said. I didn't ask how she knew. I didn't thank her. I just hugged her. She hugged me back, tight. Then she walked away. I never saw her again. I didn't know she was sick. I didn't know she'd passed away 6 months later. But I kept those shoes. I still have them. I wear them when I need to remember that someone saw me. And when I did, I didn't just survive. I started to live. I didn't cry when I heard she was gone. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't send flowers. I didn't know how. But I kept her words. "You survived. Now live." I carried them with me every day. I carried them when I moved into my own apartment. I carried them when I got my first job outside the diner. I carried them when I learned how to pay taxes. I carried them when I bought my first real bed. I carried them when I finally stopped looking over my shoulder. I carried them when I stopped being afraid. I didn't need to thank her. She already knew. She had already told me. And I finally understood what she meant. Living wasn't about being safe. It wasn't about being rich. It wasn't about being forgiven. It was about being here, being awake, being willing to stand up even when your bones felt hollow. And that's what I did. Every day, I stood up, I lived, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because I was no longer just surviving. I was living. I met Thomas Reed at the auto shop down the road from the diner where I worked. He wasn't flashy. He didn't wear nice clothes or talk big. He wore grease-stained coveralls and had calluses on his fingers from working on engines all day. He fixed radios in the back room, and sometimes when I came in for coffee, he'd be humming a blues tune while he worked. He never asked me about my past. He never asked why I always sat by the window or why I flinched when someone raised their voice. He just said hello, handed me my coffee, and went back to his work. One Saturday night, I walked past his shop and heard him playing guitar on the porch. No one else was around. He didn't see me at first. He just played, slow and quiet, like he was talking to himself. I stood there for a long time, listening. He stopped when he noticed me. "You like that?" he asked. I nodded. He smiled, not like he was trying to impress me, just like he was happy I was there. That was the first time I felt like I could breathe. We started seeing each other after that. He took me to the river on Sundays. We didn't do much. We sat on the bank, fed ducks, talked about nothing. He told me about growing up in a small town in Kentucky, how his dad worked in a coal mine and his mom cleaned houses. He never talked about his family like they were a burden. He just said they were good people, hard workers, and that's what he learned from them. He never pushed me to talk about my life. He never pressed me for answers. He just waited. One day, he asked if I wanted to go to Franklin with him. He had a little cottage there, just 2 rooms and a porch, with a garden that needed tending. "It's not fancy," he said, "but it's mine, and I'd like you to live there with me." I didn't say yes right away. I thought about it for 3 days. I thought about what it meant to say yes. I thought about how I'd never said yes to anything before without being scared. But this time, I didn't say yes because I was lonely. I didn't say yes because I needed someone to take care of me. I said yes because I wanted to try. I wanted to build something real, not just survive. I said yes. We moved into the cottage the next month. I brought my clothes, my shoes, my picture of Mama, and the notebook I kept hidden under my mattress. I didn't bring anything else. I didn't bring the fear. I didn't bring the silence. I brought myself. Thomas didn't care that I didn't know how to cook well. He didn't mind that I burned the toast. He didn't get upset when I didn't want to go to church. He just made coffee in the morning, kissed my forehead, and left for work. At night, he came home, washed his hands, sat on the porch, and played his guitar. I started learning how to plant things. I planted tomatoes, basil, and marigolds. I didn't know what I was doing, but Thomas showed me. He didn't yell when the plants died. He just said, "Try again next week." I started feeling safe. I slept through the night. I didn't wake up with my heart pounding. I didn't check the locks 3 times before bed. I didn't flinch when Thomas touched my arm. I started to believe, maybe for the first time ever, that peace was real. I believed I could have it. Then I got pregnant. I found out on a Tuesday. I was cleaning the kitchen, scrubbing the counter, when I felt dizzy. I sat down. I thought it was the heat, but then I remembered the missed period, the nausea, the way I couldn't eat bacon anymore. I went to the clinic. The nurse gave me the test. I sat in the waiting room alone, holding the paper cup with my name on it. When she came back and said, "You're pregnant," I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just nodded. I went home and told Thomas. He didn't jump. He didn't shout. He just put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Okay." That was it. He didn't ask if I was ready. He didn't say, "We're going to be parents." He just said, "Okay." And that's what made me cry. Not because I was happy, because I was terrified. I had never known what love looked like without fear. I had never known how to be a mother without being afraid I'd hurt my child. I thought, what if I'm like my father? What if I'm like my husband? What if I can't stop myself from being cold, from being silent, from being too afraid to hold my daughter too tight? Clara was born on a cold March morning. I was in the hospital for 2 days. I didn't let go of her, not once. The nurses told me to rest, to put her in the bassinet, to sleep. I wouldn't. I held her all night. I felt her tiny fingers wrap around mine. I counted her breaths. I checked her face every 5 minutes. I was scared she'd stop breathing. I was scared I'd wake up and she'd be gone. I was scared I'd be a bad mother. I didn't know how to hold her without tensing up. I didn't know how to sing to her without feeling like I was lying. I didn't know how to look at her without wondering if I'd ruin her. Thomas stayed by my side. He brought me water. He wiped my forehead. He kissed her forehead when she slept. He never once touched her too hard. He never once looked at her like she was a burden. He never once acted like he wanted to leave. I watched him every night when he kissed her goodbye. I waited for the moment his kindness turned into something else. I waited for the moment he'd get angry. I waited for the moment he'd say something cruel. It never happened. He just kissed her. Then he whispered, "Good night, little one," and he left. I still watched. I still waited. I still braced for it. I didn't sleep much those first months. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and go to her room. I'd stand in the doorway and watch her breathe. I'd check her diaper. I'd make sure she was warm. I'd listen for any sound that wasn't normal. I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust Thomas. I didn't trust anyone. I kept thinking, what if I'm not enough? What if I'm broken? What if Clara grows up scared like I was? I started writing again. Not in the notebook. Not for myself. I wrote letters to her. I wrote, "You are safe." I wrote, "I will never hurt you." I wrote, "I am learning." I kept those letters in a shoebox under her crib. I didn't show them to Thomas. I didn't tell him why I wrote them. I just wrote them. Every night. Every time I felt afraid. I wrote until I believed them. I wrote until I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. I still braced for the moment when kindness would twist into something darker. I still waited for it. But it never came. And slowly, almost without me noticing, I stopped waiting. I started holding her without shaking. I started kissing her goodnight without checking over my shoulder. I started believing, just a little, that maybe I could be a good mother after all. I still braced for it, but I didn't need to anymore. Clara was 12 when she found the photo. I didn't even know it was still there. I had forgotten about the cedar chest in the back of my closet, the one I hadn't opened since Thomas and I moved to Franklin. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon, and she was looking for an old sweater she wanted to wear to school. She pulled out a stack of folded quilts, then a shoebox. Then the chest lid came all the way open. There it was, a small, faded picture of Mama, taken outside our Tennessee house. She was smiling, but her eyes looked tired. Clara held it up and said, "Who is she?" I was standing in the doorway with a mug of tea. I didn't answer right away. My hands went numb, my throat closed up. I set the mug down on the table too hard. The tea sloshed over the edge. I didn't wipe it up. I just stared at her, at the picture in her hands. I hadn't said Mama's name in 30 years, not since I left Tennessee, not even to Thomas. I told Clara she was a distant relative, someone from long ago, but she didn't believe me. She kept looking at the photo. "She looks like you," she said. That broke me. I sat down on the floor beside her. I didn't cry. I just started talking. I told her about the house with no running water, about the way Daddy would sit on my lap and say I was his little angel, about how Mama would hum hymns on the porch but stop the second she heard his boots on the steps. I told her about the locket I found under the azalea bush after she disappeared. I told her how I scrubbed floors until my knees bled and how I stayed quiet because I was scared they'd take me away. I told her I ran away at 16, barefoot, with nothing but 2 dresses and a picture of her. I didn't leave anything out. I didn't try to make it sound better. I just told her the truth. She didn't say anything after I finished. She just held the photo tighter. Her eyes were full of tears. Then she threw her arms around me. She hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. Her face was pressed into my shoulder. I could feel her shaking. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered. Those 3 words hit me harder than any scream ever had. I didn't know she knew what sorry meant in that way. I didn't know she could see how much I had carried alone. I started crying then, not quiet tears, but big, ugly sobs that came from deep inside me. I hadn't cried like that since the night I left Tennessee. I cried for Mama. I cried for the girl I was. I cried for all the times I told myself I was doing the right thing by staying quiet. I cried because I finally let someone else know how heavy it all was. Clara didn't pull away. She held on. She didn't ask me to stop. She just held me while I broke apart. I had spent my whole life thinking silence was protection. I thought if I never talked about it, Clara wouldn't have to know. I thought if I never showed my pain, she'd be safe. But she wasn't safe. She was carrying my silence like a second skin. She didn't need to be protected from the truth. She needed to know she wasn't alone in it. That night, Thomas held me while I cried. He didn't say much. He just let me cry. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't tell me it was in the past. He just wrapped his arms around me and let me be broken. I had spent decades believing shame was mine to carry. I believed if I talked about what happened, people would think less of me. I believed if I told Clara, she'd think less of me. I believed if I said it out loud, it would make it real. And I didn't want it to be real. But that afternoon, when Clara hugged me and said, "I'm sorry," I realized I wasn't protecting her. I was hiding. I was keeping her from knowing her own history. I was making her carry my silence instead of my strength. I had thought I was giving her safety by never talking about it. But safety isn't just having a roof over your head. It's knowing you can be honest. It's knowing you can be afraid and still be loved. I had given her books and laughter and a warm bed, but I had never given her the truth. And now she had it. And she still hugged me. And she still called me Mama. That was the first time I understood that healing doesn't start with forgetting. It starts with telling. The next morning, I woke up early. I didn't go to the kitchen right away. I went back to the cedar chest. I opened it again. This time, I took out the rest of the things inside. I found the notebook I kept hidden under my mattress when I was a girl. I found the picture of Mama and me from when I was 5. I found the locket I had buried under the azalea bush, the one I had picked up years later and kept in a small tin. I didn't throw any of it away. I didn't burn it. I didn't lock it back up. I laid everything on the kitchen table. I made coffee. I sat down. I didn't cry. I just looked at the things. I touched the photo. I traced the edge of the locket. I opened the notebook and read the first page I had written when I was 12. He touched me again. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't feel shame anymore. I felt something else. Anger, yes, but also pride. I had survived. I had made it out. I had built a life. I had raised a daughter who could look at me and say, "I'm sorry," and mean it. That was more than I ever thought possible. I didn't need to hide those things anymore. They were part of me, not the whole of me, but part of me. And that was okay. I didn't tell Thomas what I was doing. I didn't need to. He came into the kitchen later and saw the things on the table. He didn't say anything. He just poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down across from me. He didn't ask questions. He didn't try to change anything. He just sat there. After a while, he reached across the table and put his hand over mine. I didn't pull away. I didn't say thank you. I didn't need to. He knew. That was enough. That night, I took the picture of Mama and hung it on the wall in Clara's room. Not in a fancy frame, just taped to the door with masking tape. Clara saw it the next morning. She didn't say anything. She just looked at it for a long time. Then she walked over and touched the glass gently. I didn't tell her to leave it there. I didn't tell her to take it down. I didn't say anything. But I knew she wasn't going to move it. And that was the first time I felt like I had done something right. Not because I fixed the past, but because I stopped pretending it didn't exist. I didn't tell Clara every detail after that. I didn't need to. But I started answering her questions when she asked. When she asked why Mama left, I told her I didn't know for sure. But I believed she was trying to save herself. When she asked if I was scared, I said yes, all the time. When she asked if I still thought about it, I said yes, sometimes. I didn't make it sound brave. I didn't make it sound like a story with a happy ending. I just told her the truth. One day, she came home from school with a poem she wrote for class. She didn't show it to me right away. She handed it to me later that night, folded in half. I opened it. It was about a bird that flew away from a cage. The bird didn't fly to a better place. It just flew. It didn't look back. It didn't wait for someone to come get it. It just flew. I read it 3 times. I didn't cry. I just held it in my hand. I didn't say anything. I just kissed her forehead and said, "Thank you for sharing that." She smiled. She didn't say anything back, but I knew she understood. I wasn't protecting her by staying silent anymore. I was giving her the truth, and that was the only thing that ever really mattered. That night, Thomas held me again. I didn't cry. I just leaned into him. I didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. We just sat there, quiet, in the dark. I thought about the years I spent burying my pain. I thought about the nights I lay awake, afraid to breathe too loud. I thought about the way I used to scrub my skin raw in the tub, trying to wash away what he had done. I thought about how I believed shame was mine to carry, but now I knew better. Shame wasn't mine. It was his. It had always been his. I didn't need to carry it anymore. I had given it to Clara, and she had turned it into a poem. I had given it to Thomas, and he had held me without asking me to be strong. I had given it to myself, and I had finally let myself be broken. And in that brokenness, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because I was finally telling the truth. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to hide from it. Clara was 18 when she told me she was leaving for Chicago. She said it over breakfast, like it was just another decision, like choosing what to wear. She had her acceptance letter from the university on the table, next to her toast. She talked about social work, about helping people who couldn't help themselves, about how she wanted to make a difference. I smiled and said, "That's wonderful, sweetheart." I didn't cry. I didn't beg her to stay. I didn't tell her I was scared, because I remembered what it felt like to be 18 and desperate to get out. I remembered how I thought the world outside Tennessee would be kinder. I remembered how I trusted people because I didn't know any better. I knew what could happen to a girl who walked into a city with nothing but hope and a backpack. I didn't say any of that. I just went to my room and opened the drawer where I kept the little wooden box. Inside was every dollar I'd saved since I left Franklin. I didn't have much. I worked nights at the diner. I sold quilts at the county fair. I did embroidery for neighbors who paid me in cash. I saved every penny. I didn't buy new clothes. I didn't go on trips. I didn't even replace my shoes when they wore out. I saved it all for her. I counted it out on the kitchen table, $3,247. I put it in an envelope. I didn't tell her how much it was. I just handed it to her the night before she left. "For school," I said. She hugged me tight and said, "Thank you, Mama. You're the best." I held her longer than I should have. I didn't want to let go. The morning she left, I drove her to the train station. It was cold, early December. The sky was gray. She had her suitcase, her books, her little duffel bag with clothes. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "I'll write every week." I nodded. I didn't say anything. I just handed her the locket. It was the one Mama had, the silver one with the broken chain. I fixed it myself with a tiny wire and some pliers. I had kept it in my drawer for years. I didn't wear it. I didn't even look at it much. But I knew Clara needed it more than I did. I put it in her hand and closed her fingers around it. "Wear it," I said, "so you always remember where strength comes from." She looked at it, then at me. Her eyes were bright. She didn't cry. She just said, "I will." She got on the train. I stood on the platform until it pulled away. I watched the window until I couldn't see her face anymore. I got in the car and drove home. I didn't cry then. I didn't cry for days. I just kept thinking about how I had done the same thing, left with hope, with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. And now I was sending her into the same world that almost broke me. The first letter came 2 weeks later. It was on blue paper with a picture of a train on the front. She wrote about her dorm room, how small it was, how the heater didn't work right. She said she made a friend named Lisa who liked to cook and always had extra snacks. She wrote about her first class, Introduction to Human Behavior, and how the professor made her think about things she'd never thought about before. She said she was going to volunteer at a shelter downtown. She ended the letter with, "I miss you already. I wear the locket every day. It's under my shirt. I read it 3 times. I kept it in my pocket. I showed it to Thomas. He smiled and said, "She's going to be okay." I believed him. I believed her. The next letter came a week later. Then another. She wrote about a protest she joined, about how she didn't know what to say, but she stood there anyway. She wrote about getting her first paycheck from her part-time job at the library. She said she bought a new coat. She said she missed my cooking. I wrote back every time. I told her about the roses blooming in the garden. I told her about the quilt I was making for her future baby. I told her I was proud of her. I didn't tell her I was scared. I didn't tell her I still checked the lock on the door 3 times before bed. I didn't tell her I sometimes woke up thinking I heard a knock. I just wrote and waited for her next letter. Then the letters stopped. No warning, no explanation. I waited a week, then 2. I called the dorm. The girl at the front desk said Clara was fine. She was just busy with finals. I called her roommate Lisa. She said Clara was okay, just quiet lately. I called the library. They said she was still working her shifts. I started calling every day. No answer. I drove to Chicago. I took the train. I didn't tell Thomas. I didn't tell anyone. I went to the dorm. The front desk didn't know where she was. They said she hadn't been seen in over a week. I went to the library. Her shift was covered. They said she called in sick. I went to the shelter. They didn't know her name. I walked the streets. I asked people. I sat outside her apartment building. I waited. Nothing. I called the police. They said they couldn't do anything unless she was missing for 48 hours. I waited. I cried. I prayed. I didn't sleep. On the 7th day, a detective came to my door. He was old, tired-looking, wearing a coat that was too big. He didn't come in. He stood on the porch. "Mrs. Reed?" he said. I nodded. "Your daughter, Clara, was found in an alley behind a bar on the south side. She's alive. She's in the hospital." I didn't move. I didn't speak. He said more, but I didn't hear it. I just turned and walked inside. I packed a bag. I called Thomas. I got on the next train. I didn't cry on the way. I didn't scream. I just sat there, holding the locket in my hand, the one I had given her. I knew what had happened. I didn't need the details. I recognized the silence. I recognized the way her letters had stopped. I recognized the fear in my own bones. She was alive, but broken, and I knew exactly how that felt. I found her in a hospital room. She was small under the sheets. Her face was bruised. One eye was swollen shut. Her arm was in a cast. She didn't look at me when I walked in. She just stared at the ceiling. I sat down. I didn't hug her. I didn't kiss her. I didn't say anything. I just held her hand. Her fingers were cold. I held them until they warmed up. The nurse said she hadn't spoken since she was brought in. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared. I stayed with her for 3 days. I slept in the chair. I brought her food. I changed her sheets. I washed her hair. She didn't say a word. Not to me. Not to the doctors. Not to the police. They asked her what happened. She shook her head. They asked her who did it. She closed her eyes. I knew. I knew because I had done the same thing after my father. I knew because I had stopped speaking. I knew because I had learned that silence was safer than truth. I sat there and held her hand and thought, I didn't protect her. I sent her out there with nothing but a locket and a dream. I didn't warn her. I didn't tell her how dangerous the world could be. I didn't teach her to say no. I didn't teach her to run. I just gave her money and said, go be strong. And now she was broken, and I was the one who had let her go. The hospital gave her a counselor. The police gave her a caseworker. They said she would get better. They said it would take time. I stayed in Chicago for 6 weeks. I moved into a cheap hotel. I didn't leave the hospital unless I had to. I brought her books. I read to her. I played music. I didn't ask her to talk. I didn't push. I just sat with her. One day she looked at me. Just looked. Not with fear, not with anger. Just looked. And she whispered, Mama. I leaned close. I'm here, I said. She didn't say anything else, but she held my hand. That was enough. I didn't leave until she was ready. When she finally came home, she didn't speak much. She didn't go back to school. She didn't go out. She stayed in her room. She slept a lot. She ate when I made her food. She didn't wear the locket anymore. I didn't ask why. I didn't take it away. I just kept it on my nightstand. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't blame her. I blamed myself. I had given her the same thing I had been given, hope without protection. I had thought love was enough. It wasn't. I had thought teaching her to be brave was enough. It wasn't. I had thought letting her go was letting her fly. It wasn't. It was leaving her alone in a world that breaks girls like us. And now I had to learn how to fix what I had broken. I didn't know how, but I was going to try. For her, for me, for every girl who had ever been told to be quiet. I got on the train to Chicago with just my suitcase and a fire inside me that I couldn't put out. I didn't cry on the ride. I didn't sleep. I just stared out the window at the dark fields and the lights of towns passing by, thinking about Clara lying in that hospital bed, her face swollen, her eyes half open like she didn't have the energy to look at me. I kept remembering how she used to run into the house after school, laughing, her hair messy, her hands covered in dirt from playing outside. Now she couldn't even sit up without wincing. The doctors said she was alive, but they didn't say if she'd ever be the same. I didn't care about that. I cared that she was hurt, and I knew who did it. I had seen his name in the police report. I had read the comments he made in that bar, where he bragged to his buddies that she asked for it because she was too quiet and looked easy. I didn't believe in luck. I believed in what people did. And this man had done something terrible. I wasn't going to wait for the police to fix it. I wasn't going to let him walk around like he was still in charge. I found his name in the city directory. I found his address from a public record. It was a rundown building near the river, the kind of place where people didn't ask questions and the landlord didn't care who lived there. I didn't go there first. I went to the bar he hung out in, the one the police mentioned in the report. It was called the Rusty Anchor. It smelled like beer, smoke, and sweat. The lights were too bright, the music too loud. I walked in like I belonged. I didn't wear anything fancy. Just my coat, my boots, my plain dress. I ordered a coffee. I didn't drink it. I just sat at the counter and watched. I saw him. He was sitting at a corner table with 3 other men. He had a beer in front of him. He was laughing, loud. He had a tattoo on his neck. I remembered it from the photo the police showed me. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a man who drank too much and thought he was bigger than he was. I waited until he went to the bathroom. Then I took out the folder I had brought with me. Inside were copies of the police report, the hospital records, and 2 photos. One of Clara in the hospital, one of her smiling from last Christmas. I didn't have a gun. I didn't need one. When he came back from the bathroom, I stood up. I walked over to his table. He looked up, confused. "You lost?" he asked, like I didn't belong there. I didn't answer right away. I just put the folder on the table. "This is my daughter," I said. "She was attacked by you. You beat her. You left her in the street. You told people she asked for it." He laughed. "Yeah? So what? She's fine, isn't she?" I didn't flinch. I didn't yell. I just opened the folder. "Here's the report. Here's her name. Here's the hospital bill. Here's her face after you did it." I pointed to the photo. "That's her. That's what you did." The man at the next table leaned over. "Whoa, what's going on?" The bartender stopped wiping the counter. A few other people turned around. I didn't stop. "His name is Carl Hennessy. He was out on bail. He was supposed to stay away from her. He didn't. He told his friends she was asking for it. He thought no one would care." I looked at the bartender. "Do you know him? Do you know what he did?" The bartender didn't say anything. He just looked at the photo. One of Carl's friends stood up. "That's not true," he said. I looked at him. "Then why don't you check the police station? Why don't you call them? They have the report. They have the video from the security camera near the alley." I put the folder down. "You can keep pretending, or you can see what he really is." I walked out. No one stopped me. I didn't look back. The next day, the local news ran a short story. "Woman publicly exposes suspect in assault case." They didn't name me. They didn't show my face. But they showed the photo of Clara, and they mentioned the man's name. Within hours, people started calling the police. A woman who worked at the laundromat across from the bar said she saw him dragging someone that night. A delivery driver remembered seeing a woman lying on the sidewalk. Someone else remembered him bragging about it at the bar. The police reopened the case. They found new witnesses. They got a warrant. 2 days later, Carl Hennessy was arrested again. This time, they didn't let him out on bail. He was charged with aggravated assault, violating a restraining order, and public endangerment. I didn't go to the court. I didn't testify. I didn't need to. I had already done what I came to do. I had made sure people knew who he was. I had made sure he couldn't hide behind silence or luck. I had used words instead of fists. I had used truth instead of fear. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel weak. I felt strong. I didn't hit him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just spoke. And that was enough. I went back to the hospital that night. Clara was awake. She was watching TV. She didn't say anything when I walked in. I sat down. I didn't hold her hand. I didn't ask how she was. I just said, "They got him again." She turned her head slowly. Her eyes were still swollen, but she looked at me. Not with fear, not with sadness, with something else. Curiosity. "How?" she whispered. I told her. I told her about the bar, about the photos, about the police report, about how I didn't need to touch him to make him pay. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just closed her eyes. Then she whispered, "Thank you." I didn't say anything back. I didn't need to. I stayed with her until she fell asleep. When I left, I didn't go home. I walked to the river. I sat on a bench. I didn't think about Richard. I didn't think about Edward. I didn't think about the money or the house or the years I spent being quiet. I just sat there, listening to the water. I felt something inside me shift, not because I had won, but because I had finally chosen to fight. Not the way they taught me to fight, with fear, with silence, with giving in, but the way I had learned to fight, by speaking, by showing the truth, by refusing to let them bury it. I didn't win the whole war, but I won that battle. And I knew, for the first time, that I could win more. I didn't tell Clara everything. I didn't tell her how scared I was walking into that bar. I didn't tell her how my hands shook when I opened the folder. I didn't tell her how I almost turned around and left. I didn't tell her that I thought about all the times I stayed quiet when Edward hit me, when Richard demanded money, when the world told me to be patient, to be forgiving, to be good. I didn't tell her that I was still afraid. I just sat with her. I held her hand when she needed it. I made her tea. I read to her. I didn't fix her. I didn't fix the world. I just showed her that someone had stood up, that someone had spoken, that someone had refused to let the truth be hidden. And when she looked at me that night, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen since she was a child. Not just pain, not just fear, but a tiny spark, like she remembered what it felt like to believe in something good. I didn't know if that spark would grow, but I knew I had lit it, and that was enough. I didn't need to be brave all the time. I just needed to be brave once, and I had been. I didn't go back to the bar. I didn't look for him in the papers. I didn't check the news every day. I didn't need to. I knew what I had done mattered. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because I couldn't stand the thought of him walking free while my daughter was broken. I did it because I remembered what it felt like to be silent. And I knew, if I stayed silent again, I'd be doing to her what they had done to me. I didn't want that. I didn't want her to grow up thinking she had to hide. I didn't want her to think she had to be quiet to be safe. I wanted her to know that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is open your mouth and say, "This is wrong." I didn't go back to the hospital every day, but I went enough. I sat with her. I held her. I told her stories about Mama, about how she used to sing in the kitchen, about how she never complained, even when she was tired, about how she taught me to be quiet, but never to be afraid. I told her that fire doesn't die, not if you feed it with truth. And I watched, slowly, as she started to breathe deeper, as she started to blink more, as she started to look at me like I was still her mother and not just someone who had come to fix things. I didn't fix her. I didn't fix myself, but I had fought, and that was the first step. Clara didn't get better fast. She didn't wake up one day and smile again. She just got quieter, then a little less afraid. She went to Oregon, to a small school near the mountains, and she didn't call me every day like she used to. But she called, once a week. Sometimes she just said, "I'm okay," and hung up. I didn't push. I sent her jars of peach preserves every month. I made them myself, peeling the fruit, cooking them slow with sugar and a little cinnamon, sealing them in glass jars with red lids. I wrote her name on each one. I didn't write "love you" or "miss you." I just wrote her name. She never said thank you. But I saw pictures on her phone once. She had put one on her windowsill next to her bed. That was enough. I went to visit her every few months. I drove all night, slept in a motel, and showed up with the jars and a bag of cookies. She didn't hug me right away. She just opened the door, looked at me, and let me in. We sat in her tiny apartment. She had a couch, a small table, a stove, and a window that looked out at trees. She didn't talk much. I talked for both of us. I told her about the garden back in Franklin, how the roses bloomed even when the frost came. I told her about Thomas, how he fixed the porch step and didn't say a word when I cried. I told her about the old cat that lived next door and how she still came to our porch for food. I didn't ask her about the hospital. I didn't ask about the man. I didn't ask if she remembered. I just told her about things that were real, that didn't hurt. And after a while, she started telling me things too. About the professor who let her stay late in the library. About the girl in her dorm who shared her soup. About the way the mountains smelled like pine and rain. She didn't say it was better. But she didn't say it was worse either. That was progress. When I got back to Franklin, I didn't just sit around. I started going to places where women came for help. First, it was a shelter downtown. I didn't know what to say. I sat in the back of the room, my hands shaking, my throat dry. The woman running it asked if I wanted to speak. I said yes, even though I wanted to run. I stood up. My legs felt like they were made of wood. I looked at the women in the room, some young, some older, some with bruises, some with nothing but empty eyes. I said, "My name is Helen Miller. I was abused by my father when I was a child." I stopped. I couldn't say more. I sat down. No one clapped. No one said anything. But a woman in the front row nodded at me, just once. That nod felt like a lifeline. I went back the next week, and the next. I kept saying, "This happened to me." Each time it got a little easier. My voice didn't shake as much. My hands didn't tremble so bad. I didn't look at the floor. I looked at them. I told them how I ran away at 16, how I didn't tell anyone for 30 years, how I thought I was the only one. I didn't say it to make them feel sorry for me. I said it so they would know they weren't alone. Thomas didn't say much, but he was there. He didn't try to fix me. He didn't tell me I was brave. He just made coffee in the morning and sat with me when I cried. He came to my talks. He didn't sit in the front. He sat in the back, quiet, like he was just another person. But I saw him. And when I finished speaking, he would stand up and clap, slow, steady, like he meant it. He never said, "I'm proud of you," but I saw it in his eyes. I saw it in the way he held my hand when we got in the car after one of the talks. I saw it in the way he didn't ask me to stop, even when I came home with my eyes red and my voice gone. He didn't need to say it. He showed me, and that was enough. One winter night, after I spoke at a church group, an old woman came up to me. She was thin, with gray hair pulled back in a bun, and her coat was worn at the edges. She didn't look at me right away. She just held out a folded piece of paper. "My daughter vanished in '63, she said. Her voice was quiet, like she was afraid someone might hear. She was from Tennessee. Her name was Ruth. My breath stopped. Ruth. That was Mama's name. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just took the paper. It was a newspaper clipping, yellowed and torn at the corners. The headline said, "Local woman missing. Ruth Holloway, 32, last seen in town." There was a photo. It was Mama. She looked tired, but she was smiling. She was standing in front of our house, holding a basket of eggs. I had never seen that picture before. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know she had been reported missing. I thought she ran away. I thought she left me. I thought she didn't love me enough to stay, but she didn't run. She was taken. She was gone before I even knew how to ask for help. I held the paper with both hands. My knees felt weak. I didn't cry. I just looked at the photo. I looked at her face. I looked at the date. 1963. I was 12. I was the one who found her locket. I was the one who believed she was gone because of me. I wasn't abandoned. I was left behind in a storm I couldn't control. The woman, her name was Eleanor, told me she had looked for Ruth for years. She had moved to Ohio after her daughter disappeared. She had written letters to the police. She had put up flyers. She had prayed. She never gave up. She told me she had seen my name in a newspaper article about a woman who spoke out about abuse. She recognized the name Holloway. She had driven all the way to Franklin just to find me. I didn't think she was dead, Eleanor said. I just thought she was lost. And now I know. She was taken. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I should cry. I didn't know if I should be angry. I just held the clipping. I held it like it was the last piece of Mama I would ever have. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the paper in front of me. I looked at her face. I touched the photo with my finger. I whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't look harder." I whispered, "I'm sorry I believed he told me you left." I whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't know you were fighting too." I didn't find her body. I didn't get justice. But I knew the truth. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like I had failed her. I felt like I had survived the same storm. And now I could finally let go of the lie that had been choking me for 40 years. I wasn't abandoned. I was left behind in a storm I couldn't control. I sit on my porch every morning before the sun is fully up. I have my coffee in a chipped mug, the one with the blue flower that Richard broke when he was 10, and I didn't yell. I wrap myself in the quilt my mother made, the one with the uneven stitches and the missing patch on the corner. I didn't throw it out. I kept it because it was the only thing she ever made with her hands and never sold. I still feel the weight of it on my shoulders, not because it's heavy, but because it holds everything. The smell of the fabric still carries a hint of lavender soap, the kind Mama used. I don't have to close my eyes to see her. I see her in the way Clara's daughter, Maya, tucks her hair behind her ear. I see her in the way Luke laughs too loud when he thinks no one is listening. They come over every Sunday. They don't care that I don't have a big house or fancy toys. They just climb into my lap like it's the safest place in the world. "Grandma," Maya asked last week, "were you ever scared?" I didn't lie. I said, "Yes." I told her about the dark hallways at night, about how I used to count the cracks in the ceiling so I wouldn't hear the footsteps coming. I told her about the time I hid in the shed because I didn't want to be touched. I didn't make it sound brave. I just said, I was scared every day. Then I told her, but I kept going. I didn't say it to make her feel better. I said it because it's true. And now, when she hugs me extra tight, I know she understands. I write letters now. Every week, I write at least 3. I don't use a computer. I use pen and paper. My handwriting is shaky, but it's real. I send them to women who write to me after my talks at the community center. Some letters are scribbled on notebook paper. Some are typed from women who don't know how to write by hand. Some come from prisons. One came from a woman in a shelter who wrote, "I left my husband with nothing but my daughter's shoes." I wrote back and told her I knew what that felt like. I told her I didn't have money to send, but I had time. I told her she was not alone. I told her I had buried my pain for 40 years and that I didn't want her to do the same. I don't ask for answers. I don't expect replies. But sometimes I get them. A woman wrote back last month and said, "I read your letter and cried for the first time in 10 years. I didn't think anyone would believe me. I kept that letter in my pocket for 3 days. I didn't show it to anyone. I just carried it like a stone that had finally stopped hurting me. The nightmares still come. I wake up in the middle of the night, my heart pounding, my sheets wet with sweat. I hear the door creak. I feel the weight of a hand on my leg. I smell the whiskey. I don't scream. I don't cry out. I just sit up. I turn on the lamp. I put my feet on the floor. I count to 10. Then I get up and walk to the kitchen. I make a cup of tea. I sit at the table. I look at the clock. I watch the minutes pass. I know it's not real. I know I'm safe. But my body doesn't forget. The scars still ache. My knees hurt when it rains. My shoulder still twinges when I lift something heavy. That's from when he shoved me against the wall. My throat still closes when someone raises their voice. That's from when I learned to stay quiet. I don't try to fix it. I don't pretend it's gone. I just let it be. I take my pills. I drink my tea. I breathe. I don't fight it anymore. I used to think healing meant forgetting. Now I know it means remembering and still choosing to live. I don't live in a big house anymore. I live in a small apartment with 1 bedroom and a kitchen that's too small for 2 people. The windows face the ocean. I don't have a garden, but I have pots with herbs on the balcony. I grow basil and rosemary. I sell them at the farmer's market on Saturdays. I earn enough to pay my rent and buy groceries. I don't have savings. I don't have investments. I don't have a trust fund. I have my hands. I have my voice. I have my stories. I have Clara and her family. I have Sarah, who still calls every Sunday, even though she lives in Chicago. I have the women who come to rebirth. I have the quiet. I have the peace that comes from knowing I am not here to serve anyone. I am here because I chose to be. I am Margaret Holloway. I was born in a house with no running water, in a town where women were told to be quiet. I was taught to give everything and ask for nothing. I was told I was lucky to have a husband who didn't hit me every day. I was told I was selfish for wanting more. But I didn't die in that house. I didn't die in silence. I didn't die when my son took everything. I am still here. I am not rich in money. I am rich in truth. I am rich in the courage to say, I am done. I don't forget what he did. I don't pretend he's a good man. I don't say he's changed. I say he's trying. And that's enough for now. I don't need him to say sorry. I don't need him to be in my life. I don't need him to be proud of me. I just need to know I didn't break. I didn't disappear. I didn't let him win. I didn't let Edward win. I didn't let the silence win. I am Margaret Holloway. I was born in shadows. I spent my life trying to be the wife, the mother, the giver, the quiet one. But I didn't choose to be those things. I was told to be them. Now, I choose to be me. I choose to speak. I choose to write. I choose to sit on my porch in the morning and feel the sun on my face without fear. I choose to say, I was scared. I choose to say, it wasn't my fault. I choose to say, I am not alone. And if my story helps even one woman lift her head and whisper, me too, then every wound, every tear, every sleepless night will have meant something. This is my confession. This is my redemption. And this, at last, is my peace. Did you feel every word of my story, and what city are you watching from right now? Let me know in the comments, because I want to hear where my voice is reaching. If this story moved you, please send a super thanks. It helps me keep telling truths like this one. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for not turning away. I see you. On the screen, you'll see 2 more stories that changed lives just like mine did. There are hundreds more waiting for you on this channel. Don't walk away without subscribing, because your story might be next, and I need you here to hear it. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.